I'm going to see what happens here. And I've got this art that I've sketched out in advance. I'm testing a few cameras, and hopefully nothing explodes. I'm always encouraging everyone to experiment, to play, try different things. And so this is me. I've got three cameras. I've got my iPad in front of me. I've got my iPhone that's kind of up here. And then I've got a webcam that's over here. And the goal here is to give you kind of multiple views to see what I'm doing. And this piece of art that I'm going to work on right now actually is inspired by kind of a Edward Hopper-esque type of imagery where it's very moody. It's darker color schemes, not my usual bright and vibrant things that I use. These colors here are some of the color schemes, more deep red and darker greens, things of that nature. Not necessarily using these colored pencils. I'm just kind of having them out as reference points for some colors. Because honestly, I am still finding things from my move, trying to unpack. I have lots and lots of art supplies. And being that most of what I do is digital, I don't really interact with this stuff that often. And so some of it's still packed away. This is me having an excuse to unpack and figure some things out. I've got some water and watercolor over here. I'm just simply going to apply some water to the background here just so that it's activating a little bit. This is a 140-pound watercolor paper. And this is simply just a number 2 pencil that I used to sketch this out. I have over here I'll bring it into this camera. I have my trusty watercolor kit. This is my travel kit that has obviously seen a lot of action in previous days. This is something that I love to take with me. It has a little thing here for your thumb, and you can rest it on your hand and mix your colors. And obviously I've mixed a lot of colors and done a lot of things here. This, along with the Miss Sketchbook and a fountain pen, has been the thing that has been kind of my on-the-go kit, if you will. And so I have that out for some colors. I've also got a few tubes of gouache, and so emerald and a few other colors, black, and there is some watercolor in here as well, burnt sienna, and so forth. So I'm not really heading in with too much of a plan other than I kind of know that I want this to be a little bit more moody, like I said. And so we're going to kind of see what happens here together. I'm activating some of the watercolors by just putting some drops in them. And I'm going to start to apply some of this. Watercolor is always a tricky thing because it has a mind of its own a lot of times. And a lot of people don't like it because of that. They think it's hard to control. There's a lot of mistakes that can happen. And certainly that can be the case. Also, just note that I have taped the edges here. I'm just making sure that it's actually fully down because I don't want any watercolor to seep underneath. And so I'm kind of just applying this green and the water to kind of get things flowing. I guess pun intended. As I mentioned on my other live stream I did a few days ago, if anyone has any tips on music that I can play that is not going to flag me for copyrights, I would welcome that, just because honestly I'd rather have some music on. And the music that I used prior was, I believe, a YouTube channel that said it was okay and royalty free, copyright free, but it really wasn't because it ended up getting flagged and then the video got removed, and I don't want to see any of that happen again. So if you have suggestions, I'd love to hear them. And one of the things I think I'm going to end up doing with this is, once I have this layer of watercolor, and I'm not necessarily going to do this all in one sitting, just FYI, I'm going to layer this with some other materials, maybe some acrylic on top, maybe some gouache, maybe I've done pastel like I did on my previous piece with Pee-wee. I really enjoy mixing the mediums and getting different effects. Watercolor is great because you can even layer watercolor on top of watercolor. And if you have not tried this, if you've not tried watercolor before, other than maybe when you were a little kid and you over saturated your page and it started to curl up and it became a mess, if that was your experience, take heart, because that was actually my experience as well. And when I first started to come back to watercolor, I was kind of worried that I was going to have that same experience, that it was just going to become a mess, it was going to become too unruly. And thankfully, that was not the case. And it takes some, like everything else, some practice and some getting used to. And there are techniques and things that, I'm sure I'm not even necessarily doing, quote, correctly. But for me, the experience has less to do with a technique and following something to the letter than it does with experimentation. I think you've probably gathered that by now. I like to see what's going to happen unexpectedly. I like to do something that I'm not really sure what the end result might completely be. I mean, I have obviously a vision of something in mind, but I'm open to what may happen as we get there. So it's kind of like, let's hop in the car. We kind of know where the end destination is roughly that we want to go, but how we get there, I'm open to. I'm open to some off-roading. Hopefully nothing that leaves me with in the middle of the desert or highway that's broken down. Ruining my analogy now, but I think you get the point. Just having some fun. And there's something about Edward Hopper, his work, that I've always kind of appreciated because it reminds me of these movie stills. And if you're not familiar with his work, I encourage you to Google some of his work. You've probably seen it without realizing you've seen it. And there's a certain quality that, like I said, it's almost like movie stills. And there's also this loneliness, honestly, that comes through his work a lot of times. And it's this sense that these characters have this storyline going on, and we're coming in mid-story, coming in to see this person, this individual, kind of deep in thought or experiencing something internally, and yet we get to be kind of viewers, voyeurs, if you will. And it's always captivated me to think about, who are these people? What is it that they're experiencing? And see right there, there's a little spot where obviously I did not mean that to happen. So you can always go in and take a little piece of paper towel or something else and kind of blot it out if you need to. And I'll end up going over that area a little bit and fixing that, so to speak, or at least making it cooperate how I want it to. So it's all about practicing, not getting too hung up on things. And obviously right now I'm also doing this with this crazy video setup. So I'm testing this video setup. So I'm not completely just here doing this for the sake of this piece of art. I've kind of got multiple things that I'm doing at the same time, multiple experiments, if you will, and excited to see what happens as a result. So if you do have questions, by all means, leave them for me in the chats. I will not be attending the chat right now, but I am going to hopefully be saving the replays. And so if you have questions, I would love to answer them for you as best I can. And whether that's about materials, process, some other choices that I'm making, by all means, leave that and I will get back to you on that. I'll make sure that I answer as best as I can. One of the things I like about watercolor also is the fact that it does dry fairly quickly, depending upon how much water you use. And there are, like I said, layers that you can add to this. You can get all sorts of effects, and it's actually a lot of fun once you figure out how to make it do what you want it to do, or even if it's not doing what you want it to do. Simply having some fun with it. So I'm imagining that this man, he's sitting here at this bar or this corner pub, and perhaps he's just received some news, perhaps he's just gotten off of work, and he's in that kind of pensive place, reflective, thinking about maybe things that are going on in his life, things that he's contemplating. And there was a corner restaurant that my family would go to a lot where I grew up in Staten Island. And matter of fact, interesting that I remember going there from even a young age, and I was told that I was brought home from the hospital, and I guess we had stopped there, or I know that we had done that with my brother, at least because I was older and I remember that point. But there were several instances where we would go to this corner steakhouse kind of pub, and I remember getting the fried flounder, fish and chips, and that was what started my love affair with fish and chips, oddly enough. Um, those little things that you kind of remember and that kind of make up some of your fond memories when you're growing up. And that place has changed over time, but I do believe that there's still the ability to get the fried flounder there, as long as I think that place is still there anyway. I'd have to check with some family who might still be in Staten Island or visit there more regularly. But that place, it was always kind of the celebration place. And my dad really loved that place. And there was a place that would have a lot of bagpipes and celebration for St. Patrick's Day. And so it was always a lively place. So lots of fun. That's what I'm kind of imagining, that this guy is sitting there at that kind of bar countertop. Maybe he's eating his fish and chips. So all this stuff that I'm doing here is, again, just kind of laying a foundation for some stuff I'm going to lay on top of it. And so I'm intentionally being kind of loose about this as well. So if you see me kind of washing over lines and colors bleeding together and things of that nature. I'm not really too concerned about that at this particular moment, because I will go back in and I will do some refining of certain areas, and then even like pull out some things like this, some areas that perhaps I want to just kind of move the color around a little bit because it's either pulled up in one area or there's a certain texture or something that's happening that I'm not really wanting too much. That is the nice thing about watercolor too, is that you can reactivate things and move things around a little bit. I should also say that I am not really a painter. I am more comfortable with drawing than I am painting. And I think I may have had, actually, I don't even think I had one painting class in all of art school, believe it or not. My major was graphic design, so a bulk of the classes were in typography and layout, design principles, things of that nature. We did have to have a basis for some other things like life drawing and some other drawing classes, interestingly enough. But for some reason, I always gravitated towards those and not towards the painting. And so I never really had this desire to learn too many things with painting technically. And part of me wishes that I would have taken advantage of that, especially in that environment. The other part of me is kind of okay because I do end up doing a lot more drawing, and that's really more what I'm passionate about. So right now, this is pretty much what's happening. I'm letting this dry a little bit. You don't want to play around too much with things as they're wet. If you see things pulled up, like I said, you can always take a piece of paper towel, or even sometimes, let's see if I have this handy. I have these straws over to the side that have all sorts of materials in them. This is, I'm dropping things all over. This is a bag that I would normally put some stuff in to travel with. When I say travel, even if it's going out to a local park or someplace, I'd load it up with, all sorts of things. Like even these are kind of fun. These are pastels, but they're oil pastels. And so they leave a different type of texture and feel to it. I may end up using some of that on top of this. We'll see. There's also this is some more gouache. I'm not honestly really sure what this is and where this came from. I tend to have things that I collect along the way. This is a watercolor crayon. And so when you put this down, it looks like a crayon. And if you wet it and activate it, it becomes more like watercolor, which is pretty cool also. The thing I was reaching for, though, let's see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. Things like this, even like this kind of sponge. This is a sponge I got, I think, at like Michael's or some art supply store. You can always add some kind of texture if you're patting away and kind of removing some of the color or adding some texture that way. That's not necessarily what I want to do, but just, again, it really is up to your vision and how you want to do things. And so I'm going to let this kind of settle, and I will come back to this at some other point when this is dry. And then I will start to refine some things. I'll start to add some other layers. I will start to identify more of the extreme shadow that's on this side and a lighter highlight that's on this side. Give some more definition and form to some things. And again, we'll kind of see where this goes. So this has been a little experiment for me. I hope you've enjoyed it. Again, if you have questions, feel free to leave something in the chat or in the comments, and I'm more than happy to get back to you on some things. And I'd also love to know, what would you like to see? I'm at this point, I'm just sharing some things as I'm doing them, but if there are specific things that you would like to see that are certainly within my passion and skill set and interest, I would love to do some things that you have specific interest in, rather than just kind of showing up and doing whatever it is that I'm doing at the moment. So feel free to do that. Also, be sure to tune into my podcast. It's Creative Chats podcast, and it's weekly. Every week, Wednesdays, it drops, and I have all sorts of creative folks on there, not just visual artists or musicians or the people you would think are technically, the artistic people, so to speak. But I also have people who are creative business people on there, creative entrepreneurs, people who are doing some interesting things using creativity in their business, in their livelihood, in their passions and hobbies. And I love to just unpack their stories and their journeys and find a thread that we can all learn from. So that's all I got for you for tonight. So again, let me know what you think. Not necessarily of this, because I know that's inviting some comments of like, that looks horrible. Not what I'm inviting. But let me know what you think as far as what you'd like to see on these lives. And I can't wait to share more art with you. And it's not just about me doing my art, but it's about you being creative too. So go create something. And I will see you soon.